The cold metallic scent of the Galactic Empire's high court permeated the air, thick with tension as the once bustling room now hummed in uncomfortable silence. The seats around the massive oval table, built for dignitaries from all corners of the galaxy, sat empty except for the figures who had gathered for a momentous occasion. The Imperial officials, their faces impassive, looked on with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. At the center of the room, a lone human sat, shackled to a high-tech chair, surrounded by cold, gleaming walls. His name was Captain Nathaniel Shaw, once a proud diplomat sent to negotiate peace with the Empire. Today, he was a prisoner. His crisp black suit, stained with blood, bore witness to the fate that awaited him. There was no negotiation, no peace. Only death. The air grew heavier as the chamber doors slid open with a hiss, revealing an alien officer draped in silver armor. Commander Vrax, the high-ranking official of the Empire, strode toward the platform with purposeful steps. His face, covered by a sleek helmet, reflected the glowing lights above. Despite his towering figure and imposing presence, there was a glint of curiosity in his crimson eyes. Human, Vrax's voice was a low rumble, mechanical and cold. Your execution is the will of the Empire. You will be the last of your kind to stand against us. The words cut through the stillness like a blade. Nathaniel's head lifted, eyes narrowing, as if the commander's statement had never reached him. His lips curled slightly into a smirk, though his body remained stiff from the restraints. I would have hoped, Nathaniel's voice was calm, almost detached, that a better fate awaited a diplomat such as myself. But here we are. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. The tension, thick as a living creature, seemed to swell in the space between them. The Empire had expected defiance, pleas for mercy. They had expected terror. What they received instead was this, an indifference that bordered on mockery. The commander took a step forward. You mock me, human? You mock the Empire. Vrax's tone was venomous, his gloved hand rising toward the control panel that sat before him. The room went deathly quiet. You killed my people. Nathaniel's voice broke through, a bitter edge creeping into his words. You slaughtered them, just as you'll do to me now. But there's one thing you'll never understand. Vrax's hand hovered over the controls, the silence pressing in from all sides. And that is... Nathaniel's lips twitched into something that might have been mistaken for a grin, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk, the type that made a man's stomach turn. The human spirit. You can kill us, imprison us, wipe out our cities, but you'll never break us. That's something you'll never understand, Commander. A strange sound filled the room, like a muffled chuckle. It wasn't the laugh of someone on the brink of despair. It wasn't the nervous, frantic laughter of a man grasping for a last shred of hope. It was a laugh that made the cold, mechanical atmosphere feel suddenly alive with something unpredictable. The Empire had never expected this. For a moment, the vast space seemed to stretch around them, the silence growing unbearable. It wasn't just the final words of the man that hung in the air. It was the chilling resonance of his laughter. It felt dangerous. The alien soldiers stationed around the room shifted uneasily, their weapons clutched tightly. There was something unsettling about Nathaniel's behavior, something they couldn't quite understand. The commander, unmoving, looked at the human for a long moment, before slowly turning back to the console. Vrax's eyes narrowed. You're insane. Nathaniel's gaze remained unwavering. Maybe, but you'll see soon enough. With a swift motion, Vrax pressed a button on the control panel, and a sharp, mechanical hiss echoed through the room. The instant the device activated, a violent burst of energy shot through Nathaniel's chest. His body convulsed once, twice, before falling limp in his restraints. Silence once again enveloped the room. The soldiers around the chamber stood at attention, eyes fixed on the lifeless form of the human diplomat. But something was wrong. The laughter, the strange, unsettling laughter, it hadn't stopped. The human's chest rose once more, and then he laughed. The sound wasn't desperate. It wasn't frightened. It was filled with a strange, defiant joy, a laugh that echoed in the cold, sterile silence of the chamber. Commander Vrax's hands tightened into fists. He looked down at the dying man, still chuckling as if nothing had happened. There was something deeply unnerving about this human's resilience. And that was when it hit him. This was no ordinary diplomat. The room, thick with the tension of the unknown, held its breath. The human wasn't finished yet, and the Empire had just made the most dangerous mistake of all, underestimating humanity. The chamber fell silent as Nathaniel's laughter faded, his body still twitching slightly in the aftermath of the blast. His chest rose slowly, each breath ragged but steady. Commander Vrax stood frozen, his mind racing. He had seen executions before, endless, meaningless deaths. But this was different. The human should have been dead, reduced to nothing but ashes. Yet here he was alive, laughing, still defiant. Check the readings. Vrax barked to his nearest officer. His voice was taut, struggling to keep the panic at bay. Something's wrong. The officer approached the console, his fingers flying over the touch-sensitive surface. The readings are normal, Commander. He's alive. Vrax's mind refused to comprehend. The blast had been calibrated to destroy a human completely. No one had ever survived it. And yet, here was Nathaniel, sitting up, his face still twisted in that eerie grin. Impossible, Vrax muttered under his breath, his eyes locked on the human's face. Nathaniel's eyes flickered open, the glint of madness in them a mirror of the Empire's worst fear. He was still alive, but there was something more to it. Something they had missed. Is this the best the mighty Galactic Empire can do? Nathaniel's voice was calm, almost mocking, as if the blast had been little more than a nuisance. He leaned forward in his restraints, his chains clinking faintly. I've fought against worse than this. Vrax's jaw tightened. He had underestimated this human, and now he was paying for it. He had been too quick to assume that killing one diplomat would be enough to silence the human resistance. But now, as he watched Nathaniel, he knew this wasn't just a diplomat. This man was something else, something far more dangerous. Vrax's eyes narrowed. Why are you still alive? His voice was more controlled now, like a predator trying to understand the prey before the final strike. Nathaniel chuckled softly, his eyes sparkling with a mixture of defiance and dark amusement. You're not the first to ask that. In fact, I think it's going to be the last question you'll ever ask. The commander's fists clenched at his sides. He had expected a scared, broken human, pleading for mercy. Instead, this one was like a force of nature, a storm that couldn't be contained, no matter how much power the Empire exerted. He needed to understand why. Explain yourself, Vrax commanded. Now, Nathaniel's grin widened. Oh, I'm afraid you wouldn't understand, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. You see, you don't break us. You never will. The words struck Vrax like a physical blow. His mind raced back to the reports, the countless other human soldiers, diplomats, and rebels who had been killed in the Empire's never-ending campaign. Every time, they had been crushed beneath the heel of the Empire's might. But now, this one human, who should have been nothing more than a blip in their efforts, was showing them something entirely different, something that couldn't be ignored. Why did you laugh? Vrax asked, his voice low and filled with suspicion. Nathaniel paused, his smile faltering for just a second. Because I know something you don't. Something you'll never understand, no matter how many of us you kill. Vrax stared at the human, the intensity of his gaze cold and calculating. He had to break him, to find out what made him so confident, so untouchable. It was the only way to prevent this human from becoming the symbol of rebellion the Empire feared. His hand hovered over the control panel again, but before he could act, Nathaniel spoke once more. You think the Empire is invincible. Nathaniel's voice dropped to a whisper, but it's already losing. Vrax recoiled as if struck by the words themselves. He had always believed the Empire's dominance was absolute. But here, in the face of a single human, was a doubt he could not erase. His mind flashed to the reports of the human rebellion's growing influence. Were they not just scattered cells of resistance, but a real force rising against the Empire? Your people won't survive, Nathaniel added, his eyes burning with quiet fury. You've started a war you'll never win. Vrax turned away, his mind in turmoil. The arrogance, the defiance, he couldn't ignore the implications. The human's laughter, his words, they all spoke of something deeper. Something the Empire hadn't prepared for. A deep sense of unease settled in Vrax's chest. The war was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. The commander turned back to Nathaniel, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. What did you do? He demanded. Nathaniel's lips curled again into that all-knowing smile. You'll find out soon enough. With that, the room plunged into silence once more, but this time, the air felt thick with uncertainty. Vrax, for the first time in his career, wasn't sure what was coming next, but he knew, without a doubt, that humanity had just become his greatest threat. The war had only just begun, and the Empire was about to face a new kind of resistance. Nathaniel Shaw sat in his restraints, his body battered and broken, but his spirit unyielding. The glow of the Empire's high-tech prison cell flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across his face. The metallic scent of the walls mixed with the faint hum of the security system, as if the very building itself sensed the tension in the air. His mind, however, was sharp, calculating, aware of the moment that had just passed. He could feel the sting of the blast still coursing through his chest, but the pain was secondary to the urgency of his thoughts. He had a plan. For the first time since the execution attempt, the guards standing watch outside his cell shifted uncomfortably. Nathaniel could hear their whispered exchanges, the uncertainty in their voices. They, too, could not understand how he had survived. His heart rate steadied, and he focused on the strange quiet that had fallen over the room since his death had been confirmed. Vrax had believed it was over. The Empire always thought their firepower would silence the resistance, but they were wrong. The door to his cell slid open with a soft hiss, and two figures entered. One was a tall, armored officer, his face hidden behind a mask. The other was an unmarked technician, their eyes darting nervously between Nathaniel and the officer. They had been sent by the commander, no doubt to confirm that Nathaniel was, indeed, dead. They would find nothing of the sort. The technician, a young alien with pale, blue skin, cleared his throat. "He's still alive," he reported, the words faltering as if speaking them out loud made it more real. Vrax's orders had been explicit, confirmed the human was dead. But Nathaniel wasn't the simple diplomat the Empire had thought him to be. He had hidden secrets, technologies long lost to human history, kept hidden until now, when they were needed most. The Empire had overlooked the most important factor. They underestimated humanity's will to survive. And Nathaniel had played the long game, an ace up his sleeve he had never expected to use. Until now. The armored officer turned, nodding toward the technician. "Prepare him for transport," he ordered. His voice was devoid of emotion, yet there was a flicker of hesitation as he looked at Nathaniel, who still wore that unnerving grin. It seemed impossible, and yet, here the human was, laughing after being shot point-blank. Nathaniel's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You can take me wherever you want, but it won't change the fact that this war is over for you." The officer's eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping in. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his hand moving reflexively to the weapon strapped to his side. But Nathaniel wasn't done. "You don't get it, do you? You killed me, but you won't kill the idea I represent. You can silence me temporarily, but it won't stop the war. It won't stop humanity from fighting back. You'll lose." The officer's hand hovered above his weapon. "You think your species stands a chance against the Empire? Against you? Maybe not," Nathaniel said with a smile that sent a chill down the officer's spine. "But you're forgetting the real enemy, the one you've already underestimated." The technician, nervously adjusting the scanner on his wrist, seemed eager to escape the growing tension. He glanced toward the officer, then back at Nathaniel. "We need to move him," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The commander is waiting." The officer nodded reluctantly, moving toward Nathaniel with the technician in tow. As they approached, Nathaniel's smirk widened, his eyes sharp with purpose. The officer's hand shot out to grab him, but before he could make contact, a low hum filled the room. It was a sound that seemed to come from Nathaniel himself, resonating from deep within. The officer froze, his fingers twitching. The air in the cell grew heavy, charged with an unnatural static. The technician's eyes widened, his mouth opening in shock. "What the hell is that?" the officer hissed, stepping back. Nathaniel's grin deepened. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." Suddenly, a blast of white-hot energy shot from Nathaniel's chest, piercing the air like a lightning strike. The officer stumbled back, his body sizzling as the energy collided with his armor. He collapsed to the floor in a heap, smoking and twitching, the heat of the blast still radiating from him. The technician screamed, but before he could react, Nathaniel's voice rang out again. The Empire never saw this coming. The technician, wide-eyed and trembling, back toward the door. "You're not human," he whispered, his words barely audible. "No," Nathaniel said with a slow, deliberate pause. "I'm something far worse." The technician bolted, scrambling for the exit, leaving Nathaniel alone in the silence that followed the chaos. His chest still ached from the blast, but now it was different. He had awakened something deep within him that the Empire had never seen before. They had made the mistake of assuming humanity was fragile, but in truth, it was a force of nature, capable of more than they could ever imagine. As the cell door slid shut behind the fleeing technician, Nathaniel let out a quiet breath. He had begun the next phase of the war, and this time, it was personal. The battle for humanity's future had truly begun. The darkened hallways of the Imperial fortress hummed with the faint pulse of hidden energy. Nathaniel Shaw, now free from his restraints, moved with purpose, his body still aching from the blast, but his mind razor-sharp. The Empire had underestimated him, and in doing so, they had unleashed something they couldn't control. His boots clicked softly against the polished metal floor as he walked, every step deliberate. The fortress was vast, its walls a cold, unfeeling monument to the Empire's dominance. Yet, in the heart of it, Nathaniel knew there was something far more dangerous than the walls, a secret. A power that, until now, he had kept hidden from the Empire, but one that would soon shatter their certainty of victory. Nathaniel wasn't just a diplomat, nor was he just another soldier caught in a fight he couldn't win. He was a symbol, a reminder to the Empire that humanity was not so easily subdued. It was a lesson that would be taught in the most painful way possible, through resistance, through fire. His hand brushed the communicator at his wrist. The signal was clear, and his pulse quickened as he connected to the rebel cell that had been tracking his movements since his capture. Their message had been simple: "We're ready when you are." He inhaled deeply, exhaling slowly. "It's time." As he turned the corner, his eyes caught a faint shadow at the end of the hallway. The sound of footsteps grew louder. Instinctively, Nathaniel pressed himself against the wall, his breath quiet, his senses heightened. He wasn't ready to engage the Empire just yet. Not here, not now. But this was a different kind of preparation. The soldiers appeared, their heavy armor clanging as they walked past, their conversation indistinct. It was clear they hadn't noticed his presence. Not yet. Their eyes were fixed forward, unaware of the storm that was slowly but surely brewing just behind them. Nathaniel stayed motionless, letting them pass, his heart steady. He had no need for confrontation, not yet. His objective was greater than simply escaping or striking down a few enemies. No, his goal was the entire Empire. He had the power to ignite a war they couldn't win, to lead humanity into the fight it deserved to be in. He waited until the soldiers had passed, then slipped into the corridor behind them, moving quickly, silently. The plan was in motion, and every action had to be precise. The door ahead of him slid open, and Nathaniel stepped into the dimly lit command room. A few officers, their faces obscured by holographic displays and data streams, didn't even notice him enter. They were too consumed by the flow of information, too assured that their dominance would remain uninterrupted. They didn't know that this false sense of security was about to be shattered. A low hum emanated from the central control panel, and Nathaniel's hand reached for the activation switch. The soft click was drowned by the sudden surge of power that filled the room, the lights flickering as the system rebooted. "Alert!" a robotic voice boomed over the intercom. "Unauthorized access detected." The officers turned, their eyes widening as they saw Nathaniel standing at the heart of their operation. His eyes gleamed with defiance. There was no fear now, no hesitation, only purpose. "You," one officer stammered, trying to reach for a weapon. But before they could act, Nathaniel's hand moved swiftly, disabling the security system with a single press of a button. The lights in the room flickered back to normal, but the atmosphere had shifted. The Empire's grip on the situation had slipped, and they knew it. "You underestimated humanity," Nathaniel said, his voice cold but filled with an undeniable conviction. "You believed that fear would break us, that death would silence us. But I'm still here, and this war is far from over." He could see the uncertainty in their eyes now. They were beginning to understand that this wasn't some fluke. This was the spark of a fire that was already growing beyond their control. The officer who had attempted to reach for a weapon stepped forward, his hands trembling. "You can't win this. The Empire is everywhere." The fleets are mobilizing. There's nowhere for you to hide. Nathaniel's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't one of joy. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what was coming. I don't need to hide, he said, his tone steady. You're the ones who are running out of time. You're the ones who will be hunted, not us. The words hit harder than any weapon ever could, and the officers froze, their faces pale, as the reality of their situation began to sink in. From outside, a massive explosion rattled the building, shaking the walls. The sound of distant blaster fire echoed in the hallway. The rebellion had begun. Nathaniel's communicator buzzed, the voice on the other end calm but urgent. We're in. You've done it. The Empire's defenses are down. It's time to move. He nodded, but there was no satisfaction in the gesture. This is just the beginning. He turned toward the door, stepping back into the corridor as the sounds of battle grew louder, more intense. He was no longer a prisoner. He was a leader, and the Empire had just awakened the fury of a species they couldn't destroy. The storm had only begun, and the cost of underestimating humanity would soon be felt by every corner of the galaxy. Nathaniel Shaw, the diplomat, had become something far more dangerous. The heart of the storm was here, and it was unstoppable,